Mm-hmm. Well, it's almost like what George Carlin said. Ready? I'm going to play this clip.
There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want.
He was 100,000,000% correct. What do you think about that, Kachali? I heard you in the background there.
Amen to that, brother. Let me tell you.
There's nothing else that needs to be said, right?
It's just the thing is that, when I think of Ted Cruz, of course, anyone can look at my Twitter feed anytime you want. You'll see exactly what I think of that lying snake. But with all due respect, he is a lying snake. Ted Cruz has went out of his way to sell himself, and in the process, selling the American people to the globalist elite. Mm-hmm. Everything that George Carlin said is true from 20 years ago to today, from 100 years ago. This has been going on for a very long time. These people have been in power for a very long time. They like their little apple cart the way that they have it, and they are not going to go away easily because, Mr. Trump tells them that they are. Right. It's going to take a lot of people coming together like we are doing to make a change because the system is rigged. Mm-hmm. And this just has got to end. This can't go on. There's no way. We're never going to go back. I mean, don't you agree, Bill? We're never going to go back to the way it used to be because just too much is out now. Mm-hmm. But I worry, I really do, to actually find out how corrupted it is. I mean, it's already corrupt, but how deep does this corruption go? It makes me sick to my stomach to think about it.
Bill, very quickly, because I have my next guest who's on the line. He's been listening in, Gavin Mitchell from the Gavin Mitchell Show. But quickly respond to what she said. Yeah,
I mean, the horse is out of the barn. The GOP may act like they're still trying to save themselves, but they're already through. They're already finished. Right. And the establishment's already done.
Yeah. You listen to the Silent Majority here. I'm your host, Chris. And on the Rebooting Liberty Hotline, I have my co-host, Katja Lee. And my guest, I have Bill Mitchell, Mr. Bill Mitchell. I won't call him what I called him earlier. He didn't like that.
Please. Yeah.
The pole man.
But I thought you were going to call me that.
I'm sorry.
Bomb chicken, wow. I thought this was a family-oriented show.
Before I get to Gavin, let me pick up this call from Cincinnati. She's been holding for a while. I want to welcome in Carrie from Cincinnati, Ohio. Welcome to the Silent Majority.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, Carrie. Somebody put Sherry on the calling board there.
No, it's Carrie with a K, K-E-R-R-Y.
Somebody put Sherry. But go ahead. You have a question?
Hey, Sherry waiting? Maybe there's a Sherry waiting.
You have a question or a comment?
Oh, I just wanted to point out, I totally agree with you guys about what's going on with regards to Colorado. One thing that I don't think has been reported by just about anybody, and I listen to the talk shows during the day, is maybe it was kind of alluded to by Rush Limbaugh. Not sure. It was hard to really pick up what he was talking about, but it sounds like nobody's really exploring the possibility that Rush is maybe a genius here, and maybe this is kind of what he wants to do. I keep hearing about how incompetent he must be to be able to navigate all the particulars of his businesses and all the regulations that go along with that. Mm-hmm. And yet here he knows all the rules going into these primaries. Right. And he's going to be so negligent in his responsibilities to go to Colorado and Wyoming and pick these things up. And it seems pretty obvious to me, I don't know why it hasn't been really mentioned, that it sounds like he's winning this thing by doing exactly what he's doing. So the negligence is more like, hey, let's showcase the lack of the democracy here, and look what it's doing to his poll numbers. This is like the first time in months, it seems like, that suddenly Trump has jumped up in the polls, and Cruz, for his part, with not just him in particular, but also his surrogates, his supporters on Twitter and everything like that, are bragging about his ability to pick up these delegates that don't represent anybody for the most part. And now you're seeing his national polls tanking. And when all is said and done, I think years from now, people are going to look back at this and say, what an unbelievably brilliant maneuver. Right. So what do you think about the possibility of it being actually consciously thought of doing it this way?
I think Mr. Bill Mitchell mentioned that on a previous show, right, Mr. Bill?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that movie, The 300. Remember that movie?
Yep.
That in a way, what Trump is doing in these situations is, we call it a strategic retreat. Okay, is that he retreats from some of these positions, and the other side gets very arrogant and cocky, and they charge forward. But what Trump is doing is he's retreating and drawing them into a narrow canyon. Where he can attack them from above, and they're stuck. They have nowhere else to go. Right. And, I think that if Trump had gone in there and committed resources, and let's say had split the delegates in Colorado right down the middle, okay, nothing would have changed in this race at all. But by strategically allowing Colorado to be a loss, Cruz is in complete collapse.
Yeah.
That Cruz played right into his hands.
Exactly. I want to thank Harry for calling in. I got to get into.
Harry, good call.
I got to get to my next guest, Mr. Gavin Mitchell. When I first listened to Gavin Mitchell on his show, I told him, I said, listen, you're amazing, man. You're an amazing, like, he can tell a story better than anybody I've heard can tell a story. And, a lot of things happening for him. And, he has a conservative talk show, on Spreaker and, on a FM station, AM station in via Texas. He's a Texas boy. I want to welcome him in right now to the Silent Majority. Welcome, Gavin Mitchell. Thank you for waiting, man. I'm sorry. We get some callers in here that, really good callers that want to have their say, and I feel bad cutting them off, but welcome to the show.
Hey, man, thanks for having me, and thank you for the kind words. It's a little much for me to take in, but I sure do appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man. So tell us.
Great last name, by the way.
Hey, Gavin, how you doing?
How are y'all guys?
We're doing great.
We're doing great.
Yeah, you've been listening to the show. I saw that my screener put you on, and you've been listening to the show. I mean, a lot's been going on since the last time we spoke, and I know a lot's been going on for you personally. But tell the audience briefly about your show, and then we'll get into what we were talking about.
Well, we launch a daily show. You can find us on conservativeradionetwork.com every night at 5 p.m. I believe right before you, Chris.
Yep.
We are there. That's our flagship station on the internet. And then every Saturday night, we're on News and Information KLIF, 570 AM in Dallas. If you're outside the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you can find that stream. It streams live on conservativeradionetwork.com as well. So Ron and his guys have done a great favor for us by streaming that, and things are going great. We're about to move to a second hour over there, and there are some prospects in the work that you and I talked about off the air, Chris, that hopefully we can announce very soon.
Yes, I heard.
Just depending on how things go.
Yeah, exactly. And tell the audience about the. Did you talk about the AM station in Texas?
I sure did. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. News and Information 570 KLIF.
Awesome. So let's get right into it. You were talking, you heard what we were talking about. How do you feel about this whole delegate thing? I mean, I know I heard your show. I listened to your show, and I know how you feel, but let the audience know that haven't listened to your show. Let them know how you feel about the whole delegate process and what's been going on between Donald Trump's camp and Ted Cruz camp.
Okay, well, let's stick to the right. I feel like I'm walking into the lion's den a little bit, but I think your last caller and Bill Mitchell had it right. I think there's a lot to it. First off, with Colorado, those rules have been in place since the summer of 2015, and they've been similar rules since 2012 or 1912. Excuse me. So we're talking over 100 years of precedent where county conventions would take a straw poll to elect a delegate and send the delegates on to the state convention. They were unbound delegates for over 100 years. The only thing that changed this year, and it changed in the summer of 2015, is they eliminated the straw polls. They just have this convention and they send somebody on. They are unbound delegates. And one can argue that, well, that disenfranchises voters. And that very well may be true. But what happened in Colorado and what happened in Wyoming, on the surface, seems like Donald Trump got railroaded, until I listened to the Blaze Radio Network this past Saturday. On my way into the station, I was listening to the Mike Slater show, and he had Donald Trump on. And Donald Trump said something, and I don't know if he intended to or not, but he made a comment that, look, I'm self-funding my campaign to send people to Wyoming and to Colorado for minuscule number of delegates and spend millions upon millions of dollars just wasn't worth it to me. And in that statement, it told me a lot about what was going on, and I think it lends itself to this theory that, one, Donald Trump looked at the number of delegates and said, you know what, that's not worth the money, that's not worth the commitment. It's just not. But secondly, there was a chance to expose the system and continue to play this underdog versus the establishment, this working man's candidate versus the establishment, and cash that in for equity.
Right.
But make no mistake about it, I really believe Donald Trump had to change strategies after Wisconsin. And what do I mean by that, Chris? What I mean is that Donald Trump is a businessman, and he's one of the very best in the world at what he does. He markets big things. He sells big things. He builds big things. He's about doing it big. And when that field was saturated with 14, 15, 17 candidates, coming in with this marketing scheme that blanketed the country was the way to go, filling that void that was left between this administration and the lack of an opposition party. He filled that void for the disgruntled American. Like all of us, we're all sick of what's going on in Washington, and he brought a solution. But when it whittled down to him and Ted Cruz, Donald Trump should have won Wisconsin. And I'm not saying that because the polls predicted that. I'm saying that because that is a blue-collar state. It has been painted blue since the 70s. This was Donald Trump's fertile ground. This is where he excels, in those blue-collar states that lean Democratic but want somebody to voice their opinion. But Ted Cruz went in there and whipped it.
I think I don't mean to cut you off, but I think Donald Trump made up for it by winning the evangelicals down south. But anyway, go ahead. Right. No. And I'm not. The evangelical vote is a mystery to anybody. That has me baffled as much as anybody.
Right. If we've got answers, I'd love to hear them. Right. But I think the evidence that Donald Trump shifted strategies at that point and realized he needs to start playing the delegate game and not the popular vote game. Right. Came with hiring Paul Manafort, somebody who whipped delegates for Ford in 76 the last time they had a contested convention, somebody who has a campaign experience and understands how these things work.
Right.
I think that signals to the world that he's changing strategies.
Right. You listen to the Silent Majority here. I'm your host, Chris, and on the Rebooting Liberty Hotlines, I have my co-host, Katja Lee. I have my guests, Gavin Mitchell and Bill Mitchell, and I'm going to let Bill Mitchell respond to this because you did mention we're going to treat this like a debate. You did mention Bill Mitchell in your statement, so we're going to have Bill Mitchell respond. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think that Trump has adjusted his campaign. I think he's brought on some heavy hitters. He brought on Wiley. He brought on Manafort. And as you may have realized, the campaign public face has been gaffe-free for 2 weeks now. We haven't had any unfortunate tweets or retweets. Mr. Trump's tweets have been basically very positive, very just the facts, ma'am, very upbeat. Not a lot of subjective commentary. And that's good. And one of the reasons why that's good, and putting forth that presidential demeanor is good, is that it helps to get that one last segment of the public that has been lagging for Trump, and that's with single female voters.
Right.
Right. By being more presidential, by not being as confrontational, that helps with that group. If he can secure single female voters, I mean, this thing is like way, way over.
Yeah. Speaking of female voters, I want to bring in Katja Lee. The number to call is 347-338-1775. That's 347-338-1775. Katja Lee, what do you have to say about that?
I just think that Mr. Trump has completely shifted his campaign in the last couple of weeks.